Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, it's been a little while since I've done one of these. My mom came, visited for a couple weeks, and has already gone. It's frightening how much of a blink. I know it's just a repeating theme that I hit over and over again, but it's amazing and terrifying how quickly the perception of time goes. And yeah, like seemed like yesterday I was preparing for her visit, and now it's already been a few days. It's Friday, the 29th of April, 2022. She left on Tuesday, and it seemed like it was just a moment ago that she left. It's kind of horrifying, but also, always nice to see her, spend time with her. Um, Always enjoy, I don't know, there are certain aspects of Arizona that I really like, and especially at this time of year. Um, it's a little hot during the day sometimes, and flying in the afternoons is not my favorite thing, I have to say, with the wind and turbulence. Um, but I definitely don't like the lack of masking and a lot of other things that just feel like, I don't know, people, just generally speaking, it's not that people don't care about each other exactly, but it's just an aspect of like little bits of social contract seem to be absent from here. And there's a lot of stuff that, whether it's undermining education or just generally, well, in the 90s, the there was a ballot initiative. I'm so torn on these ballot initiatives. I think they're probably a net negative. I like the concept of direct democracy, but unlike Elon Musk, I am aware of the history of not only the tyranny of the majority, but how tyranny of the minority. I was trying to say. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. But there are so many problems which come from democracy, especially anyway. I mean, you look at any way that you implement it. But this direct democracy with a ballot initiative, getting on the ballot is extremely hard here. It takes hundreds of thousands of signatures, which, having collected some signatures, I understand to some extent the scale and scope of effort required for that. It's an interesting thing also where if you have money, there are, I was going to say a handful, at least like a dozen organizations whose entire business model is basically they pay people a decent amount, actually, like, I don't know, 15 bucks an hour. They can't pay per signature. There's a law about that. But they can do, you have to do, in order to stay with us, you have to do X signatures per hour, and we're going to pay you this much money per hour, which means, it's like directly they're not paying per signature, but they are paying per signature indirectly. It's a little bit like, my mom, when she was younger, was a nurse, and she told me these stories about like Catholic hospitals, and they would have, like, they don't have euthanasia, but it was somehow okay. Like, you can't actively give somebody a drug that will make them sort of just fall asleep and not wake up. But you could pull food and water from somebody who is, yeah, and then let them slowly starve to death and die of dehydration. That you can do. And somehow there's an ethical boundary there that, like, that's okay, even though the inevitable consequence is just the same. Like, that person is going to die as surely as the person who you've given a good death to. Um, and if somebody's really sick and you're going to make their last bit of time pleasant versus, torture them to death by having them be dehydrated and not eat, to me, the former seems better. I don't know. I'm weird, but some people have a religion that just tells them. I mean, religion in general tells you weird things, I guess. Anyway, in this state, ballot initiatives. If you're organized, you have a lot of money. you can get on the ballot, which is problematic because it means that if you want to make a very deceptive initiative that says you're going to transfer public lands and exchange them for other lands of equal value or something like this, and then what it really means is you're a mining company and you want to get your claws on these tasty mineral rights from parks and preserves and things, and in exchange you want to hand them land of air quotes equal value that's just turned to shit because you fucked with it, or just not very interesting or whatever. This was a ballot initiative that came up every fucking year, and it always came within striking distance of passing. And the thing about it was that like the name was very deceptive, even the summary was very deceptive. And I never voted for it, of course, because when I would do these things, I would do research, but it's hard to, I mean, you would hope that people would do research before they're voting on things, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people just see the title, they're like, ah, it sounds good, check the box. So it's really a mechanism, I think, that allows people with a lot of power and a lot of money, a lot of resources, to do things that are, in fact, anti-democratic, and that if people understood what they were, they wouldn't really vote for them. But if you are, say, the Save Our Schools organization, and you bust your asses to collect signatures, get an initiative on the ballot, fight the people who are trying to take it off the ballot using bullshit legal challenges, which is one of my least favorite fucking things about whether it's a ballot initiative or a candidate. There's obviously you don't want people to forge signatures or to fake that stuff. That is clear. Although I think to me, the threshold for especially getting a candidate on the primary ballot should be very low. It should be, maybe you have it be tens or hundreds of signatures. Like you have to put some effort into it. But I kind of think anyone who wants to run in the primary should be able to. And if you're in that range, then forgery and all of this kind of stuff that these rules are there to prevent just is not even, there's no motivation for it. Like why would you forge 10 signatures, especially if it's a felony to do that, or even 100? Like 100 signatures is something, having collected signatures, it's work, but most people, if you put your mind to it, you could collect 100 signatures in your time off and pretty short order. It's not that bad. Collecting 1,000 signatures is a pain in the ass. Collecting into the thousands of signatures, and especially if you're talking about hundreds of thousands like these ballot initiatives, it's just, I mean, there are people who do it and it is manageable, it's possible, but it's an effort. And on top of all of this stuff, getting back to this like Save Our Schools thing, the thing passed. Actually, we had like $1 billion of extra tax revenue that was supposed to go to teachers and all this kind of stuff, and then got stricken down, which is fucking just brilliant. So it's an interesting thing. It's a thing that I don't know. I mean, I'm a very big believer just in the abstract in public education, and I think education has value unto itself. I hate the framing of ROI and all of this kind of stuff, but $1 you spend on education is returned in tax revenue reliably many times over. There are different studies that say different things, but order of at least several and possibly more than 5 or 6. If you had, and this is the thing, the Republicans who claim to be conservatives, in giant air quotes, say they're really conservative and they don't want to. No person who is actually conservative who gives a shit about return on investment, like if you're at all rational and you look at that and you're like, I have an investment I can make, and I put $1 in and I get $5 back, you would jump at that chance. There's no rational argument against it. Which annoys me. And of course, you also have, I mean, just in terms of having educated citizens, If you want to have a functioning democracy, which obviously, it seems obvious, a lot of people don't. But if you do, you need an educated populace who can actually, not just educated in the sense of vocational training, but people who understand things like why absolute freedom of speech has problems. Why, and just understanding also like the history of people have tried to build things like that, and then it turns into 4chan. You know, it's not great. It's something that does not work out, reliably doesn't work out. And this is a person, I'm sorry to keep coming back to Elon Musk. He's bidding for Twitter, or he did bid for Twitter, something like $44 billion, financed using basically Tesla stock as collateral, and he cashed out $8 billion of it. Which to me, I mean, I don't know. The whole thing seems highly suspect, and it also, if you're somebody who has a net worth of hundreds of billions of dollars, and the best thing you can think to do with your money is to buy a social media company for more than, you know, the market cap at the time, which essentially also has very little hope of returning. Not that, again, not that ROI is the only thing that matters, but he's supposed to be a business genius. There's zero chance, really, of Twitter having any kind of ROI. You know, you're not going to get money out of that. And yeah, I don't know. To me, it just seems like a way to get attention. It's very much feels like the Trump thing, where I'm thinking about this motherfucker, and I don't want to, and I don't. It's like invading your fucking mind space, and he's just an asshole. Does not, to me. I mean, the best possible outcome here. And if you're watching or listening to this, I encourage you and ask you, please call your Congress people. I've called mine and then some, and ask them to do congressional hearings, because he should not be allowed, like, no one person should be allowed to control a company of this magnitude, especially through acquisition. You know, if you built something, this is another thing. I mean, if you have that much money and those kinds of resources, you could build something better than Twitter. Surely, if you're such a fucking genius, build something better than Twitter. Do it. Yeah, I mean, the answer is, of course, he's not a fucking genius, but never mind that now. But it's just annoying. It's just so fucking dumb. And the fact that somebody can have that much power, the fact that Jeff Bezos can buy the Washington Post. Now, on one hand, it's kind of nice to have the Washington Post be a little bit protected by a wealthy benefactor, but at the same time, the Washington Post runs articles explaining how great it is to have, you know, billionaires and how they're a positive thing. And it's just like, you know, interesting. It's interesting. You bought the paper and they're saying things that seem to align with your general interests. Yeah, that's totally shocking. Who could have seen? Anyway, blathering on. The thing I wanted to talk about today, and I don't want to get into specific details, I don't want to get into specific cases and all of this, but a lot of it, I guess, just jump into it. Conspiracies, conspiratorial thinking. I run into a lot of people who just, I mean, they just believe kind of silly things, frankly. And the thing about it, I don't even know how you would define conspiracy or conspiratorial thinking exactly. I mean, obviously there's the dictionary definition, but you can kind of, what is a conspiracy theory? I think a lot of it has to do with, at least the way that I see it and the way that I would differentiate it from, there are situations where people actually do get together and conspire to do something. You know, a group of people get organized and then they do something. Saying the Kochs have had, is it a conspiracy theory to say that the Kochs have funded things that have totally subverted education, undermined democracy, tried to push for a constitutional convention? No, it's actually true. It's a thing that happened. Sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's a thing that happened. Is it a conspiracy theory to say that the insurance industry and healthcare industry in general lobbied very heavily, and the ACA / Romney Care is largely written by them and benefits them and basically hands them taxpayer money more than it does the things that it set out to do? No, it's not. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. It actually happened. It is kind of technically a conspiracy by the dictionary definition of one, but it's real. And it's part of it is also, I mean, the thing that I was going to try to shave off, part of it is that a conspiracy theory, as I see it, is not just an explanation of events or situations that relies on a group of people getting together and doing stuff, but it's something where you throw parsimony out the window. And you basically, I would get more into the concept of conspiratorial thinking, which is essentially, it's kind of like you can add endless epicycles to whatever your ideas of something are. If anything doesn't fit your model, rather than saying the model doesn't work, you say, well, yeah, there's like this, there's always an extra layer of bullshit that you can come up with to make that model work. It's not that this evidence means that your theory is wrong. It's not that all of these things mean that we've probably been on the moon. It's that somehow people have arranged all of these things to make it look like that. And it's an annoying thing, because once people go down that kind of cognitive path, you can go endlessly down the fucking rabbit hole. And there's no way, there's certainly no rational argument you can make to get somebody out of that, because they're willing to believe basically fucking anything. And they're willing to take whatever your argument is and just add layers to explain it away. So that's, the thing. The reason that I want to talk about this is I was recently accused of essentially being, making a borderline conspiratorial argument, or conspiracy theory kind of conspiracy theoretic argument. And this was essentially, here's my claim, and I'll lay it out. You can decide. I don't think it's conspiratorial, or I don't think it's like conspiracy thinking exactly. Conspiratorial thinking. Joe Biden didn't like that we had the red community levels map from the CDC. It was, for a long time, it was just solid red, high levels of COVID everywhere. And he's kind of looking at that and he's like, this looks really bad, and I was sitting here supposed to reverse this. And we did the thing, we pushed on vaccines, which incidentally only something like 65% of Americans are fully vaccinated, which sounds like a lot, I guess, but the original SARS-CoV-2 virus, and with the R0 of that, the amount of transmission that had, the way that it was, the level of being contagious of that virus, you need something like, I think, depending on the model, 85-ish% of people to be vaccinated to stop the propagation, to get to herd immunity, to be done with it. The new variants have R0s, depending on where you get the numbers, upwards of 8, some 10, some 12, someplace in that ballpark. With that kind of R0, you need the vaccinated population to be something like order of 95%. I'm the lines are blurry, the details, go up or down a few on the R0, go up or down a few on the percent, but in that ballpark, right? Now, as long as you're at 65%, it's not that the vaccination is helping, and certainly it's helping protect the people who are vaccinated, so long as vaccine evasive strains don't evolve, but it's not going to stop the propagation of the virus, and it's certainly not going to stop the pandemic. Now, you have the situation that we have, and you're like, oh, 65%. 65% is shit, first of all. Biden thought, okay, we're going to get people vaccinated. And yet, there are a bunch of anti-vax assholes who are fucking up the situation. And yes, it is partially their fault that things haven't stopped and that we don't have very high vaccination rates. Although even if everybody in the United States was fully vaccinated and was like enthusiastically getting vaccinated, we also didn't unlock the patents and give these vaccines to a lot of countries in the world where their vaccination rates are fucking low as shit, you know, like single digits or low double digits. And they're places where you basically just have a human reservoir for this stuff to pass, to mutate, to get to evolve, and you know. And it's just we live in a global world. It's not like people are in their own bucket. So stuff is happening there, and then strains, because people are traveling, get carried all over the world, and they get to compete, you know, on a global stage. So you come back here, and Biden saw this map. He's like, oh, these anti-vaxxers. And yeah, the anti-vaxxers suck. I'm way on board there. But pure vaccination, I don't think should ever be the entire strategy. It's a key component in public health, but it's not, first off, it's not totally essential to eradicate something. If you have good testing and then you can do contact tracing, isolation, you can eradicate stuff as long as there's no, you know, just animal reservoir or general like source of it someplace in the environment. You can eradicate stuff just by testing regularly, good surveillance. If somebody's positive, you look at all their contacts, isolate everybody, and you know, pay them to be isolated, but isolate them for a couple weeks or a month or however long it takes. Make sure they're all testing negative, make the testing super cheap and good. And you do this, and even with a pretty contagious disease that is airborne, you could slam the brakes on it and potentially even eradicate it. Now, probably not going to eradicate this, but we could tamp it down to just like smoldering, like tiny, tiny levels. We're not doing that. And part of the way to do that is to have masking be just kind of universal. To have close contact, like don't be in enclosed, poorly ventilated spaces with a lot of people. And you can just go on these things. Having the test, trace, and isolate. And all of these things are things that we have not done. And I see people complaining about, oh, the tyranny of all these, you know, we haven't done fucking shit. Yeah, it's the most frustrating thing because people are bitching about, you know, we barely did anything at all, and people are acting like they were sent to concentration camps. I mean, it's fucking insane, like, and frustrating. So I'm not even saying that I necessarily blame Biden for being frustrated, although he definitely was taking this vaccine-only route, which was dumb. The CDC director and Fauci and a bunch of other people were never very clear or consistent on masking, or, you know, nobody really pushed for test, trace, and isolate to any great extent. Testing, I mean, yeah, it was never great. And we should have rapid PCR or rapid NAAT, and it should be free. It's much more sensitive than than the antigen testing. And if you test that way, you detect even very low levels, and you can say, okay, we got it. Ideally, you get it before somebody's even really contagious. I mean, you're shedding some virus, but you're not shedding like massive amounts that are going to infect people reliably. You're shedding like, you know, it's going to take really slim like things have to happen. It's like throw blindly at a dartboard and happen to hit it on the other side of the room rather than the wall. But, you know, it can happen, but not likely. Anyway, my claim, getting back to that, is Biden saw the red map. He's trying these things, not really listening to anyone doing public health, and, you know, which is depressing. He's got people who are doing stuff, but they're doing kind of very poor mixed messaging that's confusing people, never really got people. I mean, in order to get people doing stuff and to get, it's like marketing 101, get the message and then just bang the message over and over again and be consistent. And instead it's like, oh, mask, don't mask, mask, don't mask. And you get that and it sounds like you don't even know what the fuck you're talking about, right? It's like, if I was not somebody who has some background in this stuff and domain knowledge, I'd see that and I'd be like, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And you can't even blame people for it, really, at a certain point. So you got that. He sees the map and he's like, well, just change the metric, you know? And this is my claim again. I claim that he kind of leaned on the CDC director and said, you know, like, I want to see a green map. And I think he probably even said that, you know, like, which seems very Trumpian to me, incidentally. I want to see a green map. Figure it out. And rather than actually doing the things, and we don't want to make any risks, or don't want to make any real sacrifices to get there. And we don't want to take any time. So they come up with this community levels thing, which is a very convoluted measure of, it's not like the infection rates in the community, which actually tells you like how risky things are right now in the moment. It's kind of this weird gamish of, okay, this is how many hospital beds there are, and this is how much it's impacting public health resources. And you put all these things together, and then you're like, okay, well, we're not stretching at the seams in terms of hospitalizations. We have some beds and all this, so now we're green everywhere. It's like, yay! Which is dumb also because if we were going to be there in 2 weeks, you'd have no fucking way of knowing for 2 weeks looking at that number. Second, the limited testing that they had that was free is getting pulled back massively. We have the antigen testing, and we got like 4 tests per household of at-home antigen testing, rather than, I mean, that shit should come, every person should have one of those probably per week, frankly. And then the nucleic acid testing should just be a screening test that we're all doing. If not every week, just have like a lottery. And with some probability, you're gonna get tested, every week. And make it super easy, super painless, make it free. You go in, and if you're positive, red flag in the database. Okay, we're gonna look at everybody that you've been in touch with, who we know because your phone has contact tracing built in, like all the phones should. And everybody who's been exposed to you, we isolate them, we test them. You don't even really have to isolate people. Just test them for like 36 hours. And then, if they're negative with a nucleic acid test or PCR, they're free. And then if they're positive, you wait until they're negative. And you just pay them to stay at home. This is how much money you would have made going out. Here's a little bit of something for your trouble. Here are some resources to take care of you. And if you need to go to the hospital, we'll get you there. We'll do all this stuff for you. You do that kind of stuff, could actually control it. Instead, we're just going to redefine the numbers. Like, to me, this feels like Trump taking that Sharpie to the map and drawing his little, the numbers are not showing what I want them to say, so let's change the numbers. I don't think that's a conspiratorial thing to claim that. I think it is supported by evidence. And also, like, the person who accused me of this was saying, like, oh, you mean all of these people are lying about the numbers? No, that's the thing that's fucked up about it. They're not lying about the numbers. The numbers are the numbers. But the definition of the metric that's being used to make the map green is such that with the real numbers, which are based on things like the availability of hospital beds, are A, inherently laggy, and B, not at all representative of how bad or good things are. And the thing that sucks about this is, this is what I fucking, like, obviously you go anywhere here, and a lot of places too, people are just not masking anymore. It's like, fuck it, we're done. It's irritating. And at the moment, because we have this fake green map, you don't even know very easily, like, if I go out, am I, like, am I going through a burning building, or is it there's a brush fire off in the distance? And your risk for smoke inhalation is a little bit different in those two cases. And you have no real way of knowing because it's an invisible thing. The maps are lying, and so it bothers me. And it also really bothered me. Like I like to at least fancy myself as someone who is very much anti-conspiratorial thinking. And I do not believe that making the assertion that Biden leaned on the CDC director to get the numbers changed using a new metric, defining a new thing to get a green map, doesn't seem like a conspiracy theory to me. It seems completely obvious, supported by evidence. And it doesn't require, I mean, the thing about it is, it's not like you have to go, okay, we're going to just lie about the numbers. You don't have to. There's no need. And even the community transmission levels, like the actual risk that is out there, we're no longer really measuring it, or at least we're doing a much smaller job of it. And the policies have been set up so that even the reporting from hospitals is really ramped down. So things that used to be reported as COVID deaths are no longer. People who used to be, like they would get caught, oh, here's a positive through testing. Well, now they're not getting tested anymore because you have to pay for that. And it's not cheap. Even people who care are going out of their way. It's inconvenient. It's not cheap. You have to make an effort to do it. And there's no real upside to it. Versus before, or in the more ideal world, it would be free. It would be easy. You would go in. And frankly, you should just be able to do it anytime you want. There might be people who abuse that, but basically, you go in. If you want to go in once a week, knock yourself out. We'll test you. We'll get your results in 48 hours if you're positive. All the stuff I said about test, trace, and isolate, done. So anyway, there's another conspiracy. I have got to go because I have to print something, 3D print it, and it is loud as fuck to 3D print it, and I only have an hour and a half left to do that, and it's going to be about an hour and a half of printing. So this is going to be a very short episode, but I'm irritated about this conspiracy thing, mainly because it's one of these things like bad faith. A lot of people argue in bad faith, and so you're saying, or I would say, like, you're arguing in bad faith to people. And then the people who are arguing in bad faith start accusing you of arguing in bad faith. I know you are, but what am I? And now bad faith doesn't mean anything. Like, you just don't know. It's annoying. It just fucking annoys me. And I'll tell you, for the time being, I'm still masking, although I feel like an idiot because it's like you go out and it's like, okay, well, I'm wearing a mask. Nobody else is wearing a fucking mask. It's just like, and also because they've changed the metrics, you can't see them. Like if they had the old map and it turned green in your area, you could go, okay, well, actually I could go. Just rambling now, and I do have to go. So with that, I'll be more coherent and have a better topic next time. But thank you for listening and watching, and I will talk to you soon. 再见。